Lyria Hameen's secrets were buried so deep that even her new husband, Idris Valeh, never imagined their wedding night would uncover a truth capable of destroying them both. Lyria Hameen arrived in Dubai with an air of quiet mystery that followed her everywhere she went. She carried herself with grace, spoke softly, and rarely shared anything about her past. People around her assumed she came from a distant place where life had been difficult, and she preferred not to revisit painful memories. Her beauty and calm manner made her memorable, yet it was her hidden nature that drew the attention of Idris Valeh, a respected businessman known for his discipline and devotion to family tradition. Their paths crossed at a private cultural event, and while their connection formed quickly, it felt delicate, as if it needed careful handling. Idris came from a long line of prestigious families who valued reputation above all else. His parents were known in Dubai for their charitable work, and his own success in importing specialized luxury goods made him a rising name in the industry. When he introduced Lyria to his family, they were surprised by how little they learned about her background. She offered simple explanations, always vague, always polite. She mentioned no relatives, no long history, and no desire to dwell on her former life. Idris accepted this without hesitation, convinced that love mattered more than the details she chose to withhold. Their engagement moved at a pace that raised a few eyebrows among Idris's close friends. He ignored the quiet warnings and trusted the bond he felt. Lyria seemed gentle, thoughtful, and appreciative of every gesture he made. She embraced his culture with respect and showed enthusiasm for building a life in Dubai. Her presence softened Idris, making him more open, more hopeful, and more determined to start a new chapter. When their wedding day arrived, it was held at an extravagant hotel overlooking the turquoise coastline. The venue shimmered with warm lights, reflecting off glass surfaces and gold decor. Guests in elegant attire moved through the ballroom, admiring the floral arrangements and intricate designs. Everything felt flawless, as if the day had been crafted for a fairy tale story. Idris looked confident and proud, while Lyria appeared calm, her expression unreadable yet serene. Throughout the celebration, whispers traveled behind raised glasses and polite smiles. Some guests wondered about her family's absence, others questioned the speed of the wedding. A few, observing her closely, felt something unusual about her, though they could not identify what. Still, the beauty of the moment overshadowed the quiet doubts. Lyria walked with grace, accepted blessings without hesitation, and never revealed even the slightest hint of discomfort. After the final dances, photographs, and farewells, the couple made their way to a luxurious private suite prepared especially for their first night as husband and wife. The room was decorated with soft rose petals, glowing candles, and delicate fabrics arranged with artistic precision. It was meant to symbolize the start of a warm, secure life together. Idris believed nothing could disturb this image he had built in his mind, a life rooted in love, stability, and complete trust. Lyria entered the suite with silent steps, her movements slow, almost reflective. Idris followed, unaware that the peace surrounding them was fragile. Their wedding night should have been filled with anticipation and joy, yet beneath the surface, questions Idris had ignored for months lingered like faint shadows. Lyria's identity, her missing family, and her unexplained gaps of history formed a quiet tension neither of them addressed. What waited behind those locked doors was not the blissful beginning they imagined. The suite held more than romantic decorations. It held truths that had been buried, secrets that had remained unspoken, and revelations that would soon turn a beautiful night into the most haunting moment of their lives. Everything that appeared perfect only hours before was about to unravel, revealing a reality far darker than anyone could have predicted. Idris Valeh had always been a man guided by precision and routine, but on his wedding night, a strange restlessness took hold of him. The romantic atmosphere of the suite did little to calm his thoughts. He watched Lyria move about the room with her usual quiet grace, yet something about her seemed distant, as if she were drifting through the moment rather than living it. The closer the night drew them together, the more evident her hesitation became. Idris tried to brush off the unease, convincing himself it was nothing more than nerves, but a deeper instinct stirred, quietly insisting that something was wrong. Lyria sat on the edge of the bed, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. She seemed to be gathering pieces of herself, arranging them into a calm mask that Idris had seen many times before. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture still and composed. The silence in the room grew heavier by the minute, and though nothing was said, the atmosphere began shifting into something sharp and uneasy. Idris noticed small details he had previously overlooked. Lyria had brought almost nothing with her when she moved into his home weeks earlier. No cherished belongings, no photographs, no mementos from a childhood or family life. She owned only what she bought after arriving in Dubai. He had dismissed it with the assumption that she wanted to start fresh, but now the absence of a past felt unsettling. Even the way she carried herself that night seemed calculated, as if she were preparing for an event rather than a new beginning. While Lyria remained still, Idris walked around the suite, pretending to admire the view from the towering windows. In reality, he was trying to organize the storm of thoughts forming in his mind. The horizon stretched endlessly, lights shimmering across the water below, but nothing eased the growing tension. His breathing deepened, and a pressure settled in his chest. As minutes passed, Idris found himself replaying memories, searching for signs he might have missed. He recalled the first week they met, when she skillfully diverted questions about her background. He remembered the time she claimed she had no living relatives, but avoided offering any details. He thought about her fear of medical checkups, her reluctance to share identification documents, and her strange reaction when his mother asked about her childhood. At the time, these things had seemed harmless, chalked up to a desire for privacy. Now they felt like pieces of a puzzle he had ignored. Lyria finally stood and approached a small travel bag placed near the dresser. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost resigned. Idris turned toward her, watching closely. The sound of the zipper opening echoed strangely loud in the quiet room. She reached inside and lifted out a folded piece of thick, worn paper. It looked old, far older than anything she owned, and something about the way she handled it suggested it held more weight than its size implied. When Lyria placed the paper on the bed, Idris felt the last bit of comfort drain from the room. She stood beside it, still silent, her eyes lowered as though she feared what revealing the truth might cause. Idris slowly approached, each step guided by a mix of dread and determination. The air felt tight, as if the suite itself were holding its breath. The folded document, though he had not yet opened it, radiated an air of importance, perhaps even danger. Idris sensed that whatever lay within those creased edges would shatter the image he had created of his new wife. His heart thudded heavily as he reached for it, feeling a tremor of fear run through him. Lyria remained motionless, not offering an explanation, not defending her secrecy. He unfolded the paper with careful hands, revealing the first glimpse of a truth he was never prepared to face. It was not a romantic letter, nor a sentimental keepsake. It was something far more alarming, something that hinted at a past far removed from the gentle persona Lyria had shown him. The moment Idris realized what he was looking at, the room seemed to tilt, his breath caught, and a chilling certainty settled over him.
Nothing about their marriage was what it seemed, and the night was only just beginning.
Idris Valeh stared at the open document in his hands, struggling to process what he was seeing. The paper was old, creased from years of folding, its edges worn and browned. But the text remained clear enough to reveal something impossible to ignore. It appeared to be an old medical report from another country, stamped with an unfamiliar clinic's insignia. The details were brief, clinical, and brutally direct. They referred to a patient named Lyria Hameen, confirming a surgical procedure she had undergone years earlier, one that Idris had never known about, one that contradicted every assumption he had made about her life and identity. His heartbeat grew heavier with every line he read. He felt as though he was slowly descending into a deeper layer of confusion he could not climb out of. The information scraped at his trust, peeling away the foundation of their relationship with silent force. He turned his gaze toward Lyria, who still stood motionless, her posture stiff and expression unreachable. She did not attempt to justify anything. She simply waited, as if she knew the moment was inevitable. Idris placed the document on the bed and moved a step back, trying to understand the strange mixture of fear, shock, and betrayal rising inside him. The woman he believed he knew felt suddenly unfamiliar, like a stranger wrapped in a familiar shape. He tried recalling every moment that hinted at secrecy, but the memories now felt sharp, cutting through the illusion he had willingly embraced. Lyria finally shifted, her hands clasping at her sides. Her silence was not defensive, but heavy, as though she carried years of unspoken truths that could not be easily released. She did not look at the document. She seemed to already know every word written on it. Her breathing was calm, almost unnervingly controlled, as if she had rehearsed for this moment many times. Yet there was a subtle tremor in her shoulders that suggested she feared the consequences more than she wanted to show. Idris walked toward the window again, pressing his hand to the cool glass as he tried to steady his racing mind. The city lights below sparkled, steady and indifferent, offering no comfort to the chaos unraveling behind him. He felt as though he had stepped into a trap built from trust he had freely given. His wedding night now felt less like a celebration and more like an unveiling of a carefully managed deception. The longer the silence stretched, the more suffocating the air became. Idris turned back to the bed, his eyes shifting between the document and the woman he had promised to spend his life with. The room that had been decorated for romance now was layered with tension. Soft candlelight flickered across the walls, making shadows appear like distorted figures hovering around them. A sudden realization struck Idris with a cold certainty. The fact that Lyria had kept this document hidden, not destroyed, not misplaced, suggested she expected the truth to surface at some point. Perhaps she knew this moment would come. Perhaps she had married him despite the risk, hoping love would be enough, or believing he would accept whatever she carried. But Idris could not shake the feeling that the truth was only a fragment of something larger, something darker. Lyria carefully reached for the travel bag again, pulling out another folded item. This one was smaller, a laminated card. She placed it beside the medical document with precise care. Idris approached cautiously, every instinct bracing for another shock. The card bore an ID photo of Lyria, but the name was entirely different. The revelation struck him harder than the first. She had lived an entire life he knew nothing about. She had carried a different identity, hidden before stepping into his world. The woman who just hours earlier had become his bride was, in that moment, no longer the woman he thought he loved. She was someone else entirely, someone with a past he had never imagined, a truth she had buried so deep that only the quiet of their wedding night had finally forced it into the light.
The final piece of the picture was forming, but Idris sensed that the most dangerous truth was yet to be revealed.
Idris Valeh felt a coldness inside him as he stared at the identification card lying beside the medical document. The photo was unmistakably Lyria, yet the name printed beneath belonged to someone he had never heard of, Ilara Navesh. The birth date was different, the place of origin unfamiliar, and the list of details contradicted everything she had ever told him. It became clear that the life she had shared with him was meticulously crafted, shaped to hide whatever truth she desperately wished to bury. Lyria stood completely still, her eyes lowered as if she were bracing herself for an impact. The quiet of the suite pressed down harder with every passing second. The romantic candles flickered along the walls, creating an eerie contrast between the gentle setting and the harsh reality unfolding within it. Idris felt as though the walls were closing in, trapping him in a space where love had been replaced by confusion and fear. He moved away from the bed, pacing the room in slow, uneven steps. His mind struggled to form clear thoughts. Every memory of Lyria now felt distorted. Her reluctance to talk about her childhood, her vague references to the past, her lack of belongings, all the signs he had ignored now felt painfully obvious. He wondered how he could have missed so much, or worse, whether he had chosen not to see it because he wanted to believe in the love he thought they shared. Meanwhile, Lyria opened her travel bag once more, her hands trembling as she searched through its contents. This time she retrieved a small metal box, its surface scratched and dented. It looked old, older than the documents she had already revealed. She held it close to her chest for a moment, as though the weight of the object carried more than just physical heaviness. Idris watched her closely, unsure whether he wanted to know what was inside. When Lyria placed the box on the bed and opened it, Idris saw several items neatly arranged within. A faded photograph of a little girl, 2 worn bracelets made of braided thread, and a tiny silver emblem shaped like a crescent. None of it made immediate sense to him, but he noticed something unsettling about the photograph. The girl in it looked strikingly similar to Lyria, yet not identical. There was a resemblance, like a sibling or a mirror image from another time. The picture's background showed a place that looked rural and impoverished, a stark contrast to the woman who now stood in a luxury suite overlooking Dubai's glittering skyline. Idris felt a sudden wave of unease. The items seemed less like mementos and more like evidence of a life left abruptly behind, a life that might have been dangerous, a life she may have been running from. Lyria's breathing shifted, becoming shallow and uneven. She slowly closed the metal box and stepped back, her shoulders drawn inward. Idris sensed that whatever secrets she carried were not merely personal, they were heavy with consequence. Something in the way she stood suggested she feared not just judgment, but pursuit, as though the past she had escaped was still watching her, waiting for a moment of weakness. The tension grew, filling every empty space of the room. Idris tried to assemble the fragments in his mind, but no clear picture formed. He felt as though he were standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into darkness he had no guide through. He realized that everything Lyria had revealed so far was only a fraction of the truth. The medical document, the false identity, and the old keepsakes painted a partial story, one that hinted at danger, desperation, and reinvention, but something critical was still missing. Why had she chosen him? Why marry so quickly? What exactly had she been hiding from? As these questions tightened their grip around Idris's mind, Lyria reached once more into her travel bag and pulled out the final item, a sealed envelope with an official stamp from a foreign agency. Its appearance sent a jolt through Idris, for he sensed that whatever truths lay inside would change everything. The revelations already uncovered had shaken him deeply, yet he instinctively knew the contents of that envelope would be the real turning point, the one that would make the night spiral into something irreversible. And with trembling hands, Lyria placed it on the bed,
offering the final key to a reality more dangerous than Idris had ever imagined.
Idris Valeh approached the sealed envelope with caution, sensing it held the darkest truth yet. The official stamp printed across it was unlike anything he recognized. It looked old, worn, and authoritative, the kind used for matters involving law, identity, or international records. The edges of the envelope were frayed, as though it had passed through many hands before reaching Lyria. She stood several feet away, her body tense, her gaze fixed on the floor. Every part of her posture suggested that the contents of that envelope were the reason she had built her life on secrecy. Idris slid a finger beneath the flap and carefully opened it. Inside were several folded pages, thicker than normal paper. As he unfolded the first sheet, the room seemed to shrink around him. The words were written plainly, without emotion. Idris Valeh approached the sealed envelope with caution, sensing it held the darkest truth yet. The official stamp printed across it was unlike anything he recognized. It looked old, worn, and authoritative, the kind used for matters involving law, identity, or international records. The edges of the envelope were frayed, as though it had passed through many hands before reaching Lyria. She stood several feet away, her body tense, her gaze fixed on the floor. Every part of her posture suggested that the contents of that envelope were the reason she had built her life on secrecy. Idris slid a finger beneath the flap and carefully opened it. Inside were several folded pages, thicker than normal paper. As he unfolded the first sheet, the room seemed to shrink around him. The words were written plainly, without emotion, yet each line delivered a blow to every belief he had held about his wife. The document revealed that Elara Navesh, Lyria's true identity, had once been placed under protective monitoring by a foreign agency. She had been connected not to a crime she committed, but to one she witnessed as a child. The fading photograph in the metal box now made sense. The report explained that Elara had a twin sister who disappeared during a violent incident involving a criminal group operating in remote regions. Elara had survived by sheer chance, rescued by authorities who had been investigating the group for years. The document stated that Elara's identity had been changed twice over the years, not merely for her safety, but to prevent the criminal network from locating her. The reason for the secrecy about her past, her family, and her childhood was not shame, it was survival. She had lived her entire life in a cycle of relocation, new identities, and silence. The report also suggested that her file had recently been flagged, indicating renewed activity from the people she once escaped. A chilling realization swept through Idris. She had not married him simply for companionship or a new beginning. Her quick decision, her reluctance to discuss her past, her efforts to remain invisible, they were attempts to outrun a threat that never stopped chasing her. Dubai, with its vast population and constant movement, was the perfect place to disappear again. But marrying him had placed him directly in the path of danger he never knew existed. Idris turned toward Lyria, the weight of the truth pressing against him. She finally lifted her eyes, and for the first time he saw genuine fear, a deep, consuming fear she had been hiding long before they ever met. There was no deception in her expression now, only the raw vulnerability of someone who had run out of places to hide. The silence between them deepened as Idris pieced together the final fragments. The medical document from her past was part of the injuries she had sustained during her escape. The false identification card was one of her many government-issued names. The small bracelets and photograph in the metal box were the only remains of a life stolen from her. And the envelope, this final piece, confirmed that danger had resurfaced and was drawing near. As Idris held the pages tightly in his trembling hands, a sudden noise echoed from the hallway outside their suite. It was faint, but sharp enough to make Lyria flinch.
Her breath caught, and she took a step back as though she expected someone to break through the door in any moment. Idris felt his pulse quicken. The noise came again, closer this time. The truth they had just uncovered was not merely part of her past, it was also part of their present. The people who once hunted her could now be nearby, perhaps already aware of her new location. The luxury suite, once meant for celebration, transformed into a fragile shelter unfit to withstand the danger tightening around them. Idris's life had changed in a matter of minutes. His wedding night had unraveled into a truth more harrowing than any nightmare. Lyria had not set out to deceive him out of malice. She had done so because survival left no room for honesty. And now both their lives were woven into a threat neither could ignore. As the hallway fell silent again, Idris realized that the shock of her secrets was only the beginning. The true danger, the one that shaped her entire existence, was drawing nearer, and what happened next would determine not only their marriage, but their lives.
Idris Valeh stood frozen, listening for another sound from the hallway, but the silence that returned felt even more unnerving. It was as if the building itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Lyria had retreated to the far side of the room, her trembling hands pressed against the wall, as though she were bracing for an impact she had already endured too many times. Her eyes darted toward the door repeatedly, wide and hollow, reflecting years of fear compressed into a single night. The envelope, the documents, and every object she had revealed scattered across the bed formed a mosaic of truth that Idris had never asked for, yet now could not escape. He felt torn between two overwhelming forces, betrayal and compassion. Lyria had hidden everything from him, but she had done so because her life had been shaped by danger, not deceit. Understanding that didn't erase the shock racing through him, but it softened the edges of his anger. He stepped closer to her, though cautiously, as if approaching a wounded creature. The room's dim lighting cast long shadows that stretched across the floor, making the luxury suite resemble a vault holding secrets, not a honeymoon sanctuary. The faint hum of the city below did nothing to anchor him. Instead, it reminded him of how fragile their safety had become. Beyond these walls, millions of people lived their lives unaware of the threat that had circled back to her, and now to him. Lyria finally lifted her gaze, meeting Idris's eyes with a mixture of despair and resignation. She seemed prepared for rejection. Perhaps she had lived her entire life anticipating it. His presence in her life had been the closest she had come to stability, yet she had brought her dangers into his world without warning. She appeared ready for him to cast her aside, to walk away, to abandon her the way her past had forced everyone else to. But Idris didn't move away. Instead, he studied her trembling form, realizing that fear had shaped her more than deceit ever had. He felt a deep ache in his chest, an ache born from the realization that she had lived this fear alone for so long. Before he could speak, another sound echoed from the hallway. This time it was not a faint noise, it was clear, distinct, a series of slow, steady footsteps approaching their door. Idris felt his entire body tense. Lyria pressed herself closer to the wall, her breath short and shallow. A small device near the suite's entrance, a hotel cleaning alert panel, blinked unexpectedly. It flickered once, then twice, though no staff were present. The sudden light felt out of place, like a signal rather than a malfunction. Idris exchanged a glance with Lyria, who instantly recognized the pattern. Her reaction was immediate. Her knees weakened, and she whispered a shaken breath, as if a nightmare she had tried to outrun had suddenly caught up to her. She reached for the metal box she had shown earlier and removed the silver crescent emblem. Idris hadn't understood its significance before, but seeing the urgency in her hands now made it clear that it was more than a keepsake. It was a marker, perhaps a symbol connected to the very group she had escaped, a warning or a claim, something only those who hunted her would recognize.
The footsteps stopped directly in front of their door. The handle did not turn, but the presence on the other side was unmistakable. Idris felt sweat dampen his palms as he stepped slightly in front of Lyria, more out of instinct than strategy. He didn't know who stood outside, but the tension radiating from Lyria made it clear that this was no coincidence. Minutes passed in heavy silence, though they felt like hours. Whoever stood there did not knock, did not try to enter. Instead, they remained perfectly still, as though listening, waiting for a sound from inside. Idris had never felt more exposed. Finally, the footsteps slowly retreated down the hallway. Each step echoed with a deliberate, measured rhythm, suggesting that the person was not leaving in haste, but in calculation, as if they were signaling that they knew where she was and that this was only the beginning. Lyria collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face. Idris approached her, unsure whether to offer comfort or prepare for action. Before he could decide, she lowered her hands and reached for the envelope again. At the bottom, beneath the reports, was a smaller slip of paper she hadn't shown him earlier. It contained a single sentence delivered in sharp, printed text, a message from the agency that once protected her. "Your location has been compromised. Do not trust anyone." The warning struck Idris like lightning. If she could not trust anyone, who did that include? Him? The hotel? The authorities? Everything they knew, every illusion of safety had vanished. The night that began with celebration had twisted into a gripping countdown neither of them understood fully yet. And as Idris stared at the message, he realized their next choice would decide whether they survived what was coming or became the final victims of a past determined to reclaim her.